so this is Vibes session 1. We're talking about emotions and, along with our games, more importantly tonight, control. So with that, is anyone going to be honest with me and tell me that we have any fellow control freaks in the room tonight? We got some liars in the room tonight.
Maybe a little bit. Kind of depends on what it is.
Kind of depends on what it is. Can you get the light up there? Whether you want to admit it tonight or not, you are controlled by something. All of us are controlled one way or the other about our emotions. So if you've seen the rest of the film, you will realize that the particular actress lady in her role, she was very passive-aggressive type personality. She took a lot of flack from her husband and other places to people. So Tawanda was her alternate ego, whether she was going to live life on the edge or take risk or ram a Volkswagen Beetle 4 times. So for taking her spot and losing her mind. What do we lose our mind in this room about? If we're honest with our emotions. Guys, I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. Minus the 2 weeks or the 1 week in between 2 weeks from now, when we do our game night, complete with themed decorations of finding leprechauns and gold and all that kind of good stuff. I'm working on some things. We're going to have to talk about our emotions for a few weeks. That's what Vibes is all about. So what is it that gets your goat? What is that emotion that you lose it over? Something that always seems to come back. Don't take Alyssa's food, you're going to draw back another. That's what I heard. Especially if it's Chick-fil-A cheese chicken. Interesting. I don't like that.
For you, it's
You gonna eat that nugget? Yes.
For you, it's probably football.
I'm better than I used to be. Shannon's got stories. I used to sulk.
Oh my
I used to
gosh.
sulk.
About sporting events?
Yeah, I did.
Yes.
Like a
I
bad
told
child.
him, I'm not going to talk to you.
The later in the day the game was, the better, the less sulking I would do. Especially the Florida game. That is true. That is true. What is it, what emotion, Josiah, keeps creeping back up into your life no matter how hard you try to control it or try to, we'll just say monitor for lack of a better word today. You monitor this emotion, you make sure you keep it in check around your parents. Is it anger, anxiety, jealousy, loneliness, guilt, all of the above? I just named off the next 3 we're talking about each week, by the way.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody like slamming doors? We get mad and we slam doors? We're not brave enough to do that? Janet had a father that she lost hinges on her door.
I did. My sister did, but we shared her.
They didn't have a door. That's what you get for slamming doors. Alright, so if we're honest, and if we're going to talk about some emotions, girls can do this like all day long. I totally understand that. Totally understand that. We're even going to break it down and do it like really easy for the guys. I brought you a colored wheel. I'm not even kidding. Like a colored emotion wheel where you can go and point like a caveman. So you can tell us what you're feeling, or more importantly, once we get further into the wheel, you'll understand where some of that comes from. Because here's part of the problem. When we let our emotions take the best of us, who becomes the boss? The emotion. And as we are believers in this room tonight, we've already told Jesus that we want him to be in control. In essence, the Lord and Savior part means that he's the boss. He should control our decisions, really should control our emotions. So yes, you may have a session at home that involves a slam door, or the sibling fights are even better. And I always got blamed for those. It didn't matter if I started it or not, although I was good if I started it. The instigator is normally the one that doesn't get in trouble. It's whoever hits last. So that's how I got in trouble. I just wasn't quick enough. Growing up, who's the instigator, Jonathan? Is it your little brother? He's the instigator. You the instigator for her? Like you get on Leanne's nerves?
It's mostly Christians who just take myself.
Okay. So here's the deal. If we're honest, we have to get past this point where our emotions are going to control us and realize that Jesus is a better boss in the first place, and we want to take hold of these ideas. So Jesus had an interesting time, we know, with a group called the Pharisees, and that's who we're going to talk about for the next 10 minutes here. This idea of control and emotions and who's the boss, you guys know exactly what it feels like to not feel like the boss. At least you think you do in your current environment. You're told by teachers where to be, coaches where to be, parents where to be, siblings where to be. You come here on Wednesday night and I'll tell you where to be. You never get to be the boss. You never get to make the rules. You get a little bit of freedom once you start driving type things. However, if we are bossed around by our emotions, then we are in essence giving up the very thing that we want the most, and that is freedom, not being told what to do, where to be, etc. How often has your anger got the best of you? Even a little bit of a jealousy thing, or anxiety, or loneliness, or even guilt to the point where you either have the personality where you freeze, which in the long run may be better. You freeze and do nothing, so therefore you're trapped in this lack of freedom. Or you do what any good teenager does, and that first part of that brain that doesn't develop till you're 25, scientifically proven, makes you do a stupid decision before you realize it. So in essence, the good Baptist preacher in the room would just tell you this: sin will make you stupid. Sin will make you stupid. The scene I'm talking about that happens between Jesus and the Pharisees was over the washing of hands and was over this idea of food. So before we get there, and I'm breaking down a few verses tonight, they're going to challenge Jesus on a religious activity, on just a religious notion. And it's something that we wouldn't quite understand because with COVID, we're extra sensitive about washing our hands. But if water, like it was back then, was kind of a missing commodity, when you got water, the last thing you thought about doing was just wasting it on your hands. Unsanitary, a little bit gross, I get that sort of thing. But here's the challenge. They asked Jesus this in Mark 7. Why don't your disciples live according to the traditions of the elders instead of eating food with defiled hands? The Pharisees were bothered simply because of what that meant religiously. They were accusing Jesus once again of breaking religious rules. But here was part of the problem with them. They forgot what was most important. So Jesus would actually tell them in response something that we should keep in mind. They're quoting a Leviticus law. So I haven't mentioned this much to you guys. It's a little bit confusing. It's one of those things that goes back to the Old Testament thing. Does anyone know there was more than 10 laws beyond the commandments? Would you like to take a guess at how many that was written in Leviticus for all the Jews to follow beyond the 10 they were already given? It's 3 numbered, if you want to guess. 103 Levitical commandments to follow other than the 10. We never got the first 10 right in the first place. They were given 103 more. So when I tell you guys, I'm thankful to live in the New Testament covenant, thank you and pass the bacon, I mean it. Because it would be hard for you, couldn't eat bacon back then. That was one of the 103, or other things. You couldn't eat meat with blood in it. You couldn't have, who's wearing something that's not all cotton tonight? I know I am. This looks like 50-50 or whatever shirt it was. If your shirt is not all cotton tonight, is it like 100% good old-fashioned linen, you're breaking God's commandments. It was as simple as that. It was simple as that. So his response is back in Isaiah And he says, Isaiah was right when he prophesies about you hypocrites, as it is written, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain, and their teaching are merely human rules. You have let go the commandments of God and are holding to human traditions. So now that he's on the scene, we know that this is about to change laws with the Old Testament, New Testament thing. The Pharisees are keeping people trapped in rules. They're keeping people trapped in the emotional roller coaster of trying to keep all of these 113 rules because they want to be in command of the temple. They want to be in command of over the people. They're the ones who want control. Control. See, back in the day, God gave people the law because he had their best interest in mind. He wasn't trying to keep himself happy by controlling and manipulating their behavior. Jesus basically says, don't you see that whatever enters your mouth, or whatever goes into your mouth, then out of your body defiles you. And he tells us this in Mark chapter 7. Listen to me, everyone, and understand this. Nothing outside of a person can defile them by going into them. Rather, it is what comes out of that person that defiles them. One of the things that got Jesus the most issues, or most in trouble, all that kind of good stuff, was what he ended up doing around the Sabbath, because the Sabbath had so many rules attached to it. A basic biology lesson, I don't want to teach biology, is this. You eat something, what happens to it? You might get gross. The long and short of it is, it's going to go in, it's going to come out. Thank you. Very good, very good. I'm not teaching biology here, people, when I'm opening up frogs, weird things. Think about it. They're so worried about washing hands before a meal just to follow a simple rule and a task. There is no freedom that they're offering people. Jesus is simply telling them, these are the things that defile them, which basically just means that puts us into conflict with God. We're not in conflict because we accidentally eat the wrong thing, or in this case, we won't wash our hands before we eat, no matter how gross that is. We're in conflict with God when what comes out of us hurts God's people. Because that's actually the message. When we talk about rules and control and emotions, Jesus would break it down that the greatest commandment is to love God and to love others. And what comes out of us is a direct result of what we've already been putting in, not necessarily in the moments, but what we've been feeding into our lives. Emotions are a lot like that. When we look through this in the next few weeks, we're going to talk about anger. We're going to talk about guilt. And we're going to talk about fear. I think it's in the reverse order. But we're going to break down those three in the next few weeks because we're going to dive into them a little bit further. There's a root cause of what's going on with your fear. Something's not necessarily wrong with you doesn't have to be from a psychological standpoint. Something happened to you before. Perhaps you're trying to project that on another. That's just the anger part. Fear of something else. He'd go on, Jesus say, for it is written, out of a person's heart that evil thoughts come. The reason Jesus was more concerned about what was inside of us and direct of his message about loving God and others is that everything else beyond our thoughts and emotions begins, or everything that goes with our emotions begins with a thought. Think about it. When we go down the list of the original 10, no matter the 103, Jesus mentions murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, and folly. Every one of those begins with a thought. So I'm going to ask you over the next few weeks to do what Paul told us to do, and that's to hold your thoughts captive. To hold your thoughts captive and put it up to God's word and see if it should stay there. When we talk about anger, we talk about fear, we talk about guilt. we're simply wondering about our emotions. But I need you in the first week here to think, what really gets me? Do I have more of a temper than I'm willing to admit? Am I trying to not let my coach see it, not let my parents see it? Am I trying to monitor it? Am I trying to monitor it to where I'm trying to control it? And therefore, if you're having to spend that much time trying to control it, is it not really controlling you? Jesus tells us that he wants something different for us. When it comes to our thoughts, when it comes to those emotions, Jesus is the better boss of us than we could ever be. So therefore, we have to take those emotions to him. I don't know what that emotion is for you tonight. I don't know what gets you the most. Hopefully, it isn't something that is leading you down the wrong path, although a lot of those emotions will. But two things, we'll close. Two things to think through. Think through what it is that we need to talk about. I want to let you know, as always, that your small groups are a safe place tonight to talk about certain things, or an adult after small groups. If there's something in an emotion that you need to discover, talk through, etc. But try this. Think of the one or two top emotions that you have the hardest time controlling. And this week, check in with yourself. Not checking in like you normally do when you're trying to monitor it, but be honest when you're angry. Be honest when jealous feelings crop up, when anxiety follows up again. As you look back on your day, I want you to pay attention to the emotions that are a big part of it. What were you feeling, positive and negative? Because Jesus tells us this about the life of one for us. Matthew chapter 11. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. John chapter 14. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. I do not give you as the world will give you. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. This life and the emotions that you feel inside of these lives are not supposed to control you. Your emotions are supposed to be able to be kept in check. Sometimes they get out of whack. Jesus is a way better person for us, a boss for us. For any vibe, emotion, or feeling, we have to give those things to him. We have to figure out what's going on inside of us, to have those kinds of emotions and feelings, and find rest in the fact that Jesus wants to take those things from us and give us peace. Give us peace. So think through that. What controls you as an emotion? If we're honest in the room tonight, it isn't just something simple as someone takes my food, which I hear you on that, no matter how much, if you're hungry type thing. Whatever personality trait, and it very well has, your emotions do have to do with some of your personality traits. Emotions go back to control emotions go back to thoughts, and that's where we know the root begins of something that can go either way. Captive and back to Jesus, or away and leads to a sin. And we can make a choice tonight which way we're going to go. Let me pray for you. Father God,